All right, everybody. I think we can start. Hi there, Chad. Hi, everybody here on the call. Happy to be here at JiraCon 2022. As always, awesome event hosted by Trundl. I'm really excited to be here. Excited to have all those interesting conversations, meet a lot of great people, and listen to the great talks that we had so far. My name is Karl Baumgarten. I am sales lead for Agile Hive at Seibert Media. Seibert Media is one of the largest Atlassian partners in the German-speaking region. That's why we're based in Germany, and you can maybe hear that from my accent. And we're also the developers of Agile Hive and super passionate about SAFe. So if you're not familiar with the term SAFe, which stands for Scaled Agile Framework for Enterprises, is basically Scrum on steroids, right? So if you want to take the team agility that you have with Scrum and scale it up to enterprise level, where you have many different teams that are working on the same product or service, where you have to manage dependencies between those. If one team has to deliver something before the other team can start working on something, where you have to align all of those teams to a shared vision and mission. This is kind of where SAFe comes into play and plays its strengths. So a lot of companies that are looking to make this transitions from your typical agile development with Scrum and Kanban to scaled agile with SAFe are actually using Jira already. So this is why today's talk is going to be about what we think is the easiest way to implement SAFe inside of Jira. And let's get started talking about it. So implementing SAFe can actually bring a lot of transformational value to your company if you're at that stage where you have a lot of different people that are working on the same thing that you have to align, that are maybe working on a very big or complex product. We see that oftentimes in automotive, banking, but also in smaller companies where it's just like a lot of things to take into account. SAFe can really play its strengths here. So SAFe, you can see that on the slide here, reports that it increases up to 50% increased happiness and motivation in employees, up to 50% increase in productivity, up to 75% improvements in quality, and also up to 75% faster time to market, all by having this overarching transparency across all of those teams that are working on the same thing. So it can really change the game here. And the reality is that product development is quite complex, which is why you have tools in place to manage this complexity. Oftentimes, this is probably why we're here today. This is Jira, because in Jira, you can have all of your Scrum processes. You can have your Kanban boards. You have your features that customers requested, the bugs that they can ideally submit via like a support desk with Jira Service Desk. So everything's already there. That's like your central tool. You don't really want to move on from there and switch to something different. But also now you want to introduce SAFe, and SAFe, I wouldn't say adds a lot of complexity, because in the end of the day, the whole point is to remove complexity and make things easier. But I would say it adds new rules to play by if you want to manage those teams at scale. And this is kind of where Jira reaches its limits. And as you can see on the left side, this is the Scaled Agile Framework, the SAFe framework. And you have different levels. So at the bottom here, maybe you're familiar with this, you have what was previously called the team level, now it's called essential level, where you have your development teams that are working in iterations, also known as sprints, to develop value incrementally. And this is something that you can still do with Jira, right? No problem. Maybe not all of the things here to the right and to the left, but usually you're fine here. But then if you want to group those, which is the point of SAFe, group those development teams into what's called an agile release train, so a team of teams. This is kind of where the struggles start to begin, because in Jira, you can't really do that. You can maybe separate those teams in one big project with Jira epics, but then you have the problem that it doesn't really scale well if one team needs something different than the other. And the problem gets even worse if the whole structure grows inside the company, because in SAFe, there are also more levels on top, like, for example, a large solution level where you can have what's called solution train, which is basically a train of trains. So the solution train includes different agile release trains. And you can have a portfolio management level to have a whole overview on where to put the company and where to invest the company resources. And this is something that you can't do at all in Jira. So we all know that Jira is quite flexible. You can configure a lot of stuff there. But as mentioned before, the whole concept of SAFe is built around having a hierarchical structure where you group those teams into solution trains. Those solution trains have those under a portfolio management. Sorry, I meant to say Agile restraints, but you can't really do that in Jira. There are no safe artifacts in Jira as well. And different problem is the nomenclature. So in SAFe, there's, for example, the SAFe feature, but in Jira, that's called the Jira Epic because there's not really an equivalent to that, which means that for someone that's new to SAFe and maybe also new to Jira, they have to learn those two things, right? They have to learn the tooling separate from the Agile framework, the SAFe framework, which means that it causes a lot of confusion and it doesn't really help with the adoption of the framework and the tooling. Another thing that's missing is the PI cadence. So API, which stands for program increment, is the central heartbeat of SAFe, which groups a couple of different iterations, sprints, into one program increment where the value is delivered. And this is also something that you can't do in Jira, at least not in the standard version. There's no WSJF, which is the SAFe own prioritization metric. So SAFe uses a value to know which features to deliver first, which have the biggest risk reduction, are the fastest to deliver, and can provide the most value. There's like a formula to calculate that, which is something that you have to do manually and then type in somewhere, which is a little bit annoying. You can't visualize dependencies. This especially becomes a problem if you want to look at teams or different arts that are separate from each other, but still have dependencies. So they're working in different projects. Where do you see which one has to deliver which features first? You can't really see that. There's no reporting. And if you want to do that in standard Jira anyways, there are possibilities, at least partly, to configure those things. It doesn't cover all of it by far, but you can do it partly. The problem then, however, becomes that it's not really scalable because every time something changes, there's a new team, new art launches, whatever, you have to rebuild everything. There's no support available, and it's just not really the ideal solution. And of course, that's not what the point of scaling is. And this all made us develop Agile Hive. So this is how Agile Hive was pretty much born. We said, okay, well, Jira is really flexible and SAFe is quite specific with what it needs in terms of the actual tooling, artifacts, etc. So why don't we just take all of those things from SAFe, put them in a bundle, and deliver that so that you can install it on top of your Jira to enable SAFe. And this is exactly what we did. So in the end of the day, Agile Hive is an extension for Jira to enable SAFe inside of Jira, meaning that all of the teams that are working in Jira now can stay where they are. They don't have to learn a new tool. There's no migration to a new tool required, which also, of course, would extend the timeline quite a bit, while also being completely able to have every imaginable SAFe configuration possible inside of your existing system. The main point for us, I said this earlier, the easiest way, this is one part why it's the easiest way, because everything's basically there out of the box. The other reason why it's the easiest way, we think, is that it's quite execution driven. It enables the teams that are also part of the transformation. They have to do the actual PI planning and everything in SAFe. It enables them to get started as quickly as possible, as easy as possible. So that is where the most of the functionality lies. And this is not the only approach, or we don't say it's the best way to do SAFe with Atlassian tools. We just say it's the easiest way. For example, one other popular tool that you might know if you're familiar with the Atlassian ecosystem is Jira Line. And Jira Line, while it also does SAFe with Atlassian tools, that's pretty much where the similarities end and where the differences start. They're both great tools, but for a completely different use case, because Agile Hive is an extension for Jira that enables you to do SAFe inside of Jira in one Jira instance, really bottoms-up driven, enabling the teams to get started. Whereas Jira Line is a standalone software that you can have one or more Jiras attached to, and not only Jiras, by the way, and it aggregates all of this data. And if you have a large complex organization, provides you with a great overview of what's going on in the entire company. So it really comes from the top level. It provides a lot of flexibility, huge reporting functionalities for the C-level, but kind of narrows down when we come to the team level, whereas Agile Hive comes from the team level and narrows down when we go up to the portfolio level. So really different approach here, both great for a completely different approach to the transformation. So without further ado, let's actually dive into the product and see how it works. So in this case, we just have a Jira instance. We branded it a little bit, but it's just a standard Jira that is a little bit of pre-configured. And if I dive into the configuration, this is the centerpiece, the heart of Agile Hive, because what Agile Hive allows you to do is to create your hierarchy that you have in safe. In this case, this one's called full safe. So we have all the available safe configuration, safe layers. You could also say, okay, I only need 2 for now, and maybe need to scale that up later at a later point in time. You can do that, no problem. It allows you to create those layers here. You can rename them as well. And if you said, okay, I want to have a full safe configuration in this case, what you get are those gray lines here. And this is where you can add your projects. This is why it's called project hierarchies. So for example, here we have a agile release train called Art Wiesbaden, which is where Seibert Media is located. And inside of this art, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different development teams. And all of those different development teams have their own individual Jira projects. Same for the art. So the art is also a individual Jira project or Agile Hive project. They're a little bit different. I'm going to talk about this in a second. And what Agile Hive can do now is aggregate the data from all of those teams into the art, and then again into the solution train, into the portfolio, up to the top. And on the other hand, the connection also works the other way around. So from the art level, I can centrally, for example, create a new PI that all of those teams will see in their projects. And this is pretty much the only thing that you have to do configuration-wise, which is why we say it's the easiest way. So you define your safe configuration that you need. You add your projects either by creating new ones. So if you say, I want to have a new art, you can just create a project with this. It comes pre-configured with all of the right workflows, fields, informations, and also new things that aren't part of standard Jira projects, but part of the Agile Hive projects, like custom views, custom logics, and a lot of extra functionality. Or you can take your existing Jira projects where your teams are already working today and just move them to this structure. And then you're pretty much done and good to go. And what you can do now is you have, first of all, a structure on top that enables all of the teams and arts to find their place of work quite easily, so they don't have to go into projects and then search for a project or use the search bar here. They can say, okay, well, where am I? I'm in the solution train and I'm working in the Art Wiesbaden. So let me just jump into this project right here. And what I then see is an overview, because at the moment we're in a running PI number 3. So I get to see, okay, well, first of all, who works in this PI? I see all of who works in this art, all of the people responsible. How is this art currently performing? And I see the most important safe metrics that are aggregated from the data from all of those individual team projects. So this is combined from all of the teams, the overall velocity, capacity planning, etc. I can see what features will be delivered in this PI. And from this central view, I also have all of the other things that I need to keep track of, like, for example, the art risks, where I can do my risk roaming, or the business value that I can track that should be delivered in this PI. And we could go into more detail here, but before we do this, let's just go through the process how SAFe would say you should do it. So first of all, what we need to do SAFe is, first of all, we need a PI. And here on the right side, if I do have the permission to click that, there is a button called Create New PI. And I can also see, okay, well, we're now in PI number 3. There are certain PIs in the past where we can also go and compare, for example, our velocity, see if the overall velocity of the art has improved throughout the last PIs. Or what we could do from here is say, create a new PI, name this one, for example, PI number 6, give it a certain duration, like 4 iterations, and then we can decide how long this PI should go overall and how long the individual iterations go. And if I would click confirm here, this would be created for all of the different teams inside of this art. However, I'm not going to do this right now because we're in a running PI that makes it a little bit easier to show you how this works. So, okay, we have a PI now, at least in theory. What do we need next? Next, we need something that the teams can work on in this PI. So we need features or enablers or bugs. So let's go to this backlog view. And here we can see, well, we have quite a few issue types here already. And if we look at one of those, for example, we can see, okay, well, a feature in Save in the end of the day is just a custom issue type inside of Jira. So everything is, as mentioned before, everything is part of Jira. There's not a differentiation between Agile Hive and Jira. It just extends the functionality. So on the out project level, a feature is an issue type that has certain fields that are automatically filled once a team plans this into a certain PI. And it also, for example, has fields where I can calculate my WSJF for my prioritization. So I don't have to remember this weird long formula from Save. I can just type in those values here if I know them. And this generates and calculates my WSJF value, which then is used to prioritize my program backlog. Okay, so we now have a feature. It's in the status analysis. Let's say for this feature, which was already there, let's move this one to the status program backlog. So in Save, if a feature is analyzed and we say, okay, well, we want and can deliver this, it lands in the status program backlog. And we can see this on our Kanban board, which is also, as you know, based on standard Jira functionality. We have an overview of all the features. And in this column right here, we have the status program backlog, where we can see our individual features that can be worked on by the teams. So let's say we take this one, or maybe let's take this shop system. It's ready for development. So let's say the PI has started. We have decided that we want to implement this one. Maybe one other thing that we can do, I can show you that here, is we can also, if we know that this one will be delivered in at a certain point of time, there's also for the whole art a roadmap view where we can say, okay, well, this shop system that we have in our program backlog, this one, we should start working on this now, and this will probably be done by the end of the PI. We can just drag and drop it here. And as a next step, the teams would say, if I go down a level to the team, in this case, I jumped into the team animation project, so a different Jira project where the team is working, one team inside of this art. So I'm now in a different role. The team would say, let's skip this one right here. In the PI planning, how Save says it is, the vision of the product is presented, where we want to go, the top 10 features from the program backlog are presented, and then something starts that's called the breakout sessions. So the teams go into individual sessions where they plan their work while also taking into account work from other teams. And this we see oftentimes done in, for example, Miro or other whiteboard tools where the people do their planning and then try to figure out in which direction the dependencies go. And once the planning is done there, they move everything manually to Jira, which not only takes a lot of time, but also has the chance that things go wrong. And with Agile Hive, you can do this fully integrated inside of Jira. So there's a view for the team breakout sessions where the teams can select their capacity for the individual iterations just in story points by clicking there. And then on the sidebar on the right side, they can say, okay, please show me from the art level, so the level above the project where we were before, even if it's not the same, this issue type doesn't exist in this project, it exists at the level above, but I can still see it here. And I can still say, okay, show me from the art level that has all of those teams below it, show me all of the features in the program backlog. And then I can say, for example, the shop system, let's work on this one. So I drag this onto my board, and then I can break this feature down into individual user stories, either by saying, okay, show me my team backlog. So in this project, with all of the stories that I've already created, and I can say, okay, this one, I know that this belongs to this certain feature. I can just drag and drop it onto there. Or I can click here and create a new story by saying new story, giving this, for example, an assignee. Let's assign it to Laura and say this one should have 13 story points. It's automatically linked to the right iteration and PI, and also to the right parent issue, which in this case is this feature. We are going to see that in a second. And the number of story points, in this case, 13 story points that we just added, are also aggregated. So I now see, okay, my load is 42 story points, but that's over our actual capacity of 35 story points. So I should move that somewhere else. And now it turns gray again. So now I'm good. I'm under my capacity limit again, which is the one thing that we have to take into account when doing the planning. The other thing to take into account when doing the planning is if there are any dependencies to other teams where they have to deliver something first before we can deliver that. And this is also done. So if we, for example, view the planning boards of the other teams, which we have down here, so we can say, okay, show me how the team 3D artists did their planning. And I can see, okay, well, there are quite a few red lines. So we need to check in with this team again and make sure that we don't have those critical dependencies anymore. And how this works in the end of the day is that I can close this one so that's a little bit more structured, that there's a link type that we added. So this also is based on standard Jira functionality. There's a link type called requires and a link type called required by, which we can add if we just hover over it and click on the button manage dependencies. And depending on in which direction this link type goes, it generates a colorful line. And in this case, the planning is correct, so it's green. But if we move this, the color changes in real time. And in this case, it turned yellow, meaning that, okay, well, you should maybe it can work, maybe it doesn't. If we plan it completely incorrectly, the line turns red, which indicates a critical dependency, and it also shows me that there. And all of that is based at least on standard Jira functionality. And also if we click, for example, on this user story right here, I just mentioned for these lines, we use a link type. Same thing for the overall safe architecture. So the user story is an issue type on the team level, and we use a link type called parent of child of to link this to the feature from the art level, which is technically a different project in Jira. And this again, link this to the large solution train or large solution level and the portfolio epic level. So all of that means that it uses Jira standard as a base, which also then means that number one, it's perfectly extendable by other Jira apps. If you're using other apps, like for example, something for the time tracking, you can just combine it with Agile Hive. And the other big thing is that since all of this information is stored in Jira fields or has Jira values, also like, for example, the program increment where this story is planned into, this means that this information is queryable. So you can build your own reports. You can search for certain issue types from the Jira search with JQL. Everything works just as you used to. So let's go back here. So we have done our planning. We have solved all of the critical dependencies, at least in theory. And now the PI starts and we actually do the work. And this is where it's all about keeping track that we're still on time, that we're working on the right things. And all of the different levels have their own fully automated reporting boards. So the team can always see, okay, how are we performing? What have we planned into this iteration? What have we planned into the next iteration? Are there any risks that we have to resolve? And what is the business value that we expect to deliver in this PI? And the same thing applies when we go up one level where we were before. At the program level, it's also completely automated. It aggregates the data from all of those individual teams, calculates it together. It calculates the number of story points from all of the individual user stories from the levels above that are linked to certain features that I know, okay, how much work is this actually? And what we also have here is and this is also a very, very important part of the SAFe framework, is a fully automated reporting board. So the teams do their planning in the breakout board that we have seen before, and they say, okay, I planned this user story into iteration number 4 because there I still have capacity to deliver some work. And on the level above, on the art level, where we plan not with user stories, but with features, this program board is automatically generated based off that. So if a team says the last work item, the last user story will be delivered in iteration number 4, the feature will appear in iteration number 4, because technically that's when we have all the things done, right? That's when we can shape the feature. And on this level, just like on the team level, you can also track your dependencies. You can see everything that might have an implication on feature delivery with colored lines that are either green for uncritical dependencies, yellow one for dependencies at risk, are red runs for dependencies that are critical and need to be resolved ASAP. Also, not only between different teams, but also are external dependencies. So if you have a supplier team like this, they're just using a standard Jira project with a Kanban board, they have nothing to do with SAFe. They don't even know that Agile Hive is installed. They can still see that there's a dependency that they have to solve based on their planning. So they have just a task issue type that has a certain due date that falls into this PI and is linked to this feature. It also appears on this board. And this way you can, for example, also track alt external dependencies or cross alt dependencies. So I think we have seen everything here. If we go up one level to the solution level, as mentioned before, you can have a full SAFe configuration, so up to the portfolio level. And in this case, in principle, it's pretty much the same. It now groups the data from all of the different alts into this reporting board for the overall solution train, which again, then the separate reports from the alts consisted of the different data from the teams. So everything is aggregated up to the top. You can have full transparency across the whole organization. And all of those levels are different from each other, even though they look a little bit similar in terms of the reporting, because we wanted one stringent look and feel. All of those levels are different in terms of the actual things that you see and also the issue types that we deliver. So in SAFe, on the large solution level, the work items here are, for example, a capability, an enabler, a risk that impacts the whole solution train, an objective for the whole solution train. And on the levels below, as you remember, we had on the out level, we had the issue type feature, for example. We also had the issue type bug, enabler, and on the user story, on the team level, we had the issue type user story. So all of those different levels are out of the box delivered with the right work items so that you don't have to remember, okay, which is which. It's automatically there. It's still extendable, of course, since this is just Jira. So the enablers, the capabilities are just Jira issue types. You can add fields here. You can rename them. You can give it a different logo. You can map your existing data to those new issue types that you have. So it's really quite flexible when it comes to that. In the end of the day, as said, it's all just based on Jira. So in this case, we have a large solution report. And one thing that I can show you, if we go up to the last level, which is the portfolio management level, we have an overview of all the portfolio epics that are currently being worked on and the progress and percentage, as well as story points, the status on where this currently sits, as well as the WSJF, so what needs to be delivered first. And this is something where Agile Hive kind of is limited because most of the functionality we have on the levels above, and where Jira Align would really play its strengths. In this case, we have the overview. As you can see here, we have a Kanban board, which indicates where all of those portfolio epics currently sit on the board. And one thing that I can show you that I personally think is quite helpful is that Agile Hive also has a possibility to have a fully automated documentation functionality. You can implement that wherever you want. In this case, we said we want to implement it for demonstration purposes on the portfolio level. And the use case here would be, okay, well, the portfolio epic is something that lives for a long time. It's a big company initiative that you want to track. And usually the people that are not necessarily responsible, but have a very strong interest in those big company initiatives are not the people that are actually working in Jira, right? Not the ones that are writing comments, that are moving things through the Kanban board. Those are people in C-level that want to see what's going on. They want to have full transparency, but for them, it should be easy to find as well. They don't want to understand how to use a JQL. Maybe they have never used it before. Maybe they have, but the whole point is that it needs to have a different format. And how most companies do it today is they take the data from Jira and copy paste it, for example, into a PowerPoint slide and present that to the decision makers then. In Agile Hive, we have also automated that part where we can say, if we have a new company initiative, let's just call it that, new, or let's call it new initiative, assign this one to Laura as well, and say Laura is also the epic owner. In SAFe, you would have a epic hypothesis statement. So what do we expect this epic to do? In this case, I'll just put some placeholder text here. And you can also give it a quick WSJF value so that we can know, okay, how much value would this create? What would be the job size? How long would this take us to build? What's the time criticality? Do we need to build this now? Or is it okay if we build it in a few months? And what's the risk that we can reduce by building this? And just by entering those values and creating this issue type, it says, okay, a new issue type has been created. So far, nothing out of the ordinary, right? We all know this one, everybody that has used Jira before, that's nothing new. So we have an issue type here. And if we click on reload, one thing that just appeared here is this link, which is a link to a Confluence that's connected to this Jira. But as you have seen, I've not visited Confluence at all so far. I've just created this ticket. And what Agile Hive now did is, or the automation that we have selected is, we said every time there's a portfolio epic created, there should be a great looking documentation page in our internal Confluence that we can show to our decision makers. In this case, we said, okay, this should be created in the room epic rooms, and it should automatically have the name of the portfolio epic and the task ID. I don't know what's the exact term in Jira, I just forgot about this one, as the page title, so that it's also very structured inside of the space. And then it should have a certain layout like this, where it says, okay, the most information should be on top, where we can formulate this a little bit more. Can select the WSJF, have the lean business case here. You can select whatever layout you want. We can also say, okay, this should be auto-labeled so that we can find it more easy. And the information that we have here is also updated from the Jira issue, or the Agile Hive issue in this case. So if we move this through the funnel and would move it to the status done, this would also change in real time on the Confluence page, which means that whoever's interested in seeing the progress of this portfolio epic, you can just go through to this space, have an overview of everything that's currently being worked on, see the most information here, and if they want, they can still jump into the Jira/Agile Hive. And this is just one use case that we have for this kind of automation. Another thing that you could use this for is, for example, remote PI planning. So you could say every time there's a new PI created, which we have seen earlier, if we go back here and go to the art level. By the way, I see that there are a lot of questions in the chat already. We are going to answer them in just a minute. We do have more time for a short Q&A. So if I would say, okay, every time a new PI is created, I can set this as an automation and say, well, please, in my space, in this case, it's German, so it has space here. There's a space called remote PI planning. And every time there's a PI created, you can say, please create the overall agenda of the PI planning already as pages. So all of the different agenda steps are here. You could say, okay, every time there's just something like this created, you can just go through it. So first agenda point, explain the business context. Well, okay, next agenda point, explain the product and solution vision. We have a nice layout page where you can show, okay, these are our top 10 features. This is our roadmap. This is where we want to be. You can present the architecture and vision, etc. You can lay out that just as you want. And after this is where the teams would then jump into the breakout sessions, start their planning, talk to other teams. And you can use this for pretty much any use case, for documentation of team performance, for retros, for example, inside of the teams. Just a little part of the automation that makes things a little bit easier inside of Jira and Agile Hive. So to wrap it up, before we go into the Q&A, what I've showed you so far is the on-premise version for Agile Hive. So for data center and cloud that we have developed over the last few years. What will come early next year is Agile Hive Cloud, which is a somewhat similar product, but a lot cooler, since we implemented a lot of new features, a lot of new functionality. SAFe, as you may know, also always develops, brings out new things, and we implement those into the product as well. So we will have completely reworked design, completely reworked reporting boards. We will have new views for the PI planning, where you can actually have certain filters, group certain work items together. You're a lot more flexible in terms of what you want to display. There will also be a view like this one, where you have an overall table of all the information, where you can create new columns, filter for information, show everything in a table view. And all of this, as it is in the on-premise version, is based on standard Jira. So everything's inside of Jira, based on Jira functionality, that you don't have to switch to a new tool, that you don't have to change the way you work today. Everything's there at your fingertips where you're already working. And one big thing that we also implemented in the cloud version that's coming soon are the flow metrics, which are, as you may know, a big new part of the SAFe framework, that I can say, okay, what's my flow time, my flow velocity, my flow predictability. This will all come very soon. And if you want to learn more about this one, if you want to learn more about the cloud version, or have any more questions that we can answer in the Q&A that's coming up now in this session right here, please feel free to visit us at our booth, Agile Hive booth. We would be happy to have a chat with you and yeah, show you around a little bit more if you want.
Thank you, Karl, for the session. Now we can take up some few questions that our attendees have asked. The first question is this a plugin or a Jira inbuilt feature?
So this is a plugin for Jira, an app for Jira, but everything that it adds is built on top of standard Jira. So the things that the plugin adds, or many of the things that the plugin adds, are new issue types, things that you would be able to continue deliver or configure in standard Jira, but everything that it does is not part of standard Jira. Like the value for the WSJF, for example, these are just fields. If you fill it out, it's automated. Automatically calculated, which is something that we add. The dependencies that are visualized. I mean, the actual link type is just a Jira link type. You could add this in the standard, but there wouldn't be a way to display that as colorful lines, or there wouldn't be a way to aggregate the data, even though it's just stored in standard Jira fields inside of a team or throughout the teams inside of an ART. And that's everything that Agile Hive adds as a new Jira plugin / app.
Okay. So another question we have is, do we have any planning iterations in SAFe?
I mean, everything that we have in terms of the planning, where SAFe supports, I've just showed you. I think where SAFe doesn't really require anything new or anything out of the ordinary. Everything that you could do with the standard functionality, we haven't implemented as something new. I'd like to understand a little bit more about this. So whoever asked that question, please feel free to come to our booth later. Maybe we can discuss what would be the best way to implement that with Agile Hive.
Got it. We have another question which says, if we have Scrum team with quite dynamic staffs, how to support this as an Agile Hive?
Scrum teams with quite dynamic. What was the last part? I didn't understand this one.
It said how to support, if we have Scrum teams with a quite dynamic staffs, how to support this in Agile Hive. How can we support that? Means
quite dynamic stuff, meaning that people leave and come back all of the time.
What I can do is I can make the person to talk and he can ask the question directly. Can you just raise your hand? Yeah, I have just made that person allowed to talk. He can pose the question. Please unmute yourself.
Yes. So yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Hi, can hear you well.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Actually, the elaboration is correct. The Scrum team saying we have another fixed team members in a Scrum team. So I saw the in your Agile Hive looks like the team is quite fixed, right? So I'm not sure how to support the dynamic teams.
Yeah, okay, I think I know where you want to go with this now. Thanks for the clarification. So the team that we see on those boards, it's just for visualization purposes. It has nothing to do with the permissions. So if someone new joins or leaves the team, you don't have to add them here. That's just for other people to see, okay, who works here, who can I contact if I have any questions, especially, for example, in the breakout sessions. Who's my main contact here, but it has nothing to do, at least not now. We plan to have something like this maybe in the future, with the permissions. So since this is just a Jira project, or let's go to a team level, since, for example, a development team is just working inside of a Jira project, everyone who has the permission to edit inside of this Jira project is able to move tickets around. And if you have people coming on and leaving, if they have the permission to edit this Jira or work in this Jira project, it's absolutely no problem. And you don't have to add them here. It's just a nice to have.
Okay, so where do you maintain this kind of team setup? Is it in the Agile Hive itself, or is it in the Jira?
So in this case, this team right here is just maintained. If I click here, I can edit the team members.
Okay.
It's just a user picker where you can assign a role in a text field to this person, so other people can see who works here. It's not automated. Maybe in the future we will have something where we have certain permission schemes for certain roles inside of SAFe that we can assign to certain projects. For example, RTE is a permission role. At the moment, we don't have this yet. So you can write whatever you want here. You can mention whoever you want here. It doesn't change anything in terms of the permissions.
Okay. Is there any permission setting for the PI owner or anyone else can do the updates here?
Good question. Not out of the box, but you can configure that as well. So all of the people that should be able to edit this or add new PIs, you can just create a certain role for them that they're able to do this, whereas other people are not.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I see you have some more questions. Could you please ask here only if Karl is there? You can just go ahead and mute yourself, because I see more questions here.
Yes. So all the questions from my side?
Yes, you wrote a question, any approach to indicate the external dependencies?
Oh yeah, I saw it already addressed this question. So
Fine,
I should be fine for this. But yeah, I saw there was a very good functionality about the ticket out to bring up and mapping the Confluence page. How to achieve that?
Good question. So this has basically you meant the automated portfolio epic documentation, right?
Yes.
Exactly. So the functionality is called auto page, which, as the name suggests, lets you automatically create pages in Confluence. And there are two sides to this. So number one, what you can do in the backend of Jira/Agile Hive is create an automation. So in this case, we said every time there's a new issue type portfolio epic created in the space portfolio, as a result of that, in the project portfolio, sorry, as a result of that, please create in the Confluence space epic rooms a new page under the main page epic rooms home that uses a certain template, uses a certain page title, and maybe also certain labels. And the way the information from the Jira issue comes to the Confluence page is by using placeholders for the Jira fields. So you insert that on the Confluence template. You can say, okay, the WSJF value should go here. You just insert the placeholder on the Confluence page, and then it syncs the information there.
Were you out to sync the data in between, or it's just one direction? Or it's just a static one?
So it's dynamic in the sense that if you update it in
Jira,
Jira,
if I updated the ticket in the Jira, will it automatically update the Confluence page?
Yeah, so it doesn't work the other way around. If you update it in Confluence, it doesn't update it in Jira, because technically you could just, by mistake, for example, delete all of the information on the Confluence page, and then the whole Jira epic would be empty. And
so just one direction, right? So just
exactly.
Okay, just a callback. Okay, good.
Thank you so much.
I should be set. All set. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We have another question. How are iterations planned and linked here in Agile Hive?
So the iterations are planned from the art level. So if we create a new PI, we can select the number of iterations, because those need to be the same between all teams in this art. Otherwise, you won't have an opportunity to compare the data and have certain events at the start and the end of the PI. So it needs to be the same. And you just select them here, say, okay, how long does this iteration take, this PI take? And then what's the length of the individual iterations? So you could say PI start. Let's say it starts 1st of October until end of November. So 1st of October is the first iteration that ends. It goes 7 days, or let's say maybe 14 days. And this is how you select it. And what happens in the end of the day behind the scenes is that Agile Hive creates those iterations as sprints, as Jira sprints in all of the individual team projects inside of this art. So the teams don't have to do that themselves. Otherwise, it would also cause some error. You do that centrally. The teams have that in their projects and can then, if they go to their planning view, it automatically appears here. So if I created that for the teams will see it here, and then they will be able to do their planning on this view.
Got it. We have last question for today's session. Is there a third-party add-on that supports this feature, like the feature we discussed? Now, I'm really unclear. Shravan, can you please come on, unmute yourself so that you can just explain your question more elaborately? Shravan, are you there? I think. Okay, so anyways, guys, you can just come anytime to the Agile Hive booth, which is already set up there. You can meet and chat whatever, any more questions you have. And if you want to see any use cases, you can visit anytime. And it was a nice session, Karl. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.